Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to our final bit of coverage from Texas UFOcon 2023 here in Jefferson, Texas. It has been an amazing conference. Nick Redfern is on stage right now giving a presentation about the Men in Black. We just got finished hearing about Texas airships from Tui Snyder a few minutes ago, and our good friend Daniel Allen Jones is here. He gave a great presentation earlier. Let's get into a little bit of that and a little bit about your upcoming book about Aurora, Daniel.
Yeah, well, Chris, always glad to be able to come back, and so much interesting discussion as of late when it comes to this topic, and what not a better time to be able to have an event like this after congressional hearings, after the NASA panel. People are wondering what's going on. I think it's important that we continue events that allow people to come in and be curious, ask questions, and open up the dialogue when it comes to these fascinating topics. So it's something that when we have presenters, they'll each talk about different presentations, research, things that help us kind of see that there's so many facets to this phenomenon, that it's not a singular issue. It's so multifaceted that we want to make sure that we can research all the angles that we're able to, whether it's through looking into historical records, like you mentioned with what Tui Snyder's doing with her work into the airship mystery, as well as some of the things like what Nick's talking about right now with the Men in Black. Does the government have an agency that's going out and intimidating people to, shut up about some of their sightings?
By the recent testimony from Grush, the actual whistleblower, yes, there is an intimidation group. There is a group that goes around on behalf of contractors and says, you shut your mouth, apparently. There have been numerous people from his testimony that have been threatened, whose lives have been threatened, whose livelihoods have been threatened. So whether it's Men in Black or not, the answer is yeah. There are people whose job it is to come strong-arm you from telling your story.
Right, and I think it's something that we can see has probably had an effect on those who could have come forward over the years and may not be around anymore to do so, but at least there are some who seem to have firsthand knowledge and able to hopefully get before Congress and share with the world some of this incredible stuff that I think people need to know. They deserve to be given to scientists, and hopefully not just claims, but the actual materials that they can use to work on and give us a better understanding and as I always like to say, sort of elevate the standard of awareness about this reality and society in general. So that has a lot to do with what I was presenting on just earlier about the cultural issue of how we interpret things throughout time, what we're looking at now, and what it could mean for us in the future if we, in the event that we declare that non-human intelligence is real in whatever form, whether we think of it as aliens, as spirits, as something interdimensional.
Time or space travelers through rifts in dimensions.
Right.
Whatever.
There's so many different ways that people have considered what's going on. And again, I don't think it's a singular issue. It's not just one type of UFOs out there that's doing this or that. It could be a number of different things, and we just have to be considerate that whenever this is integrated into society, it's something that doesn't shift all at once. It's something that we have to have a period of acclimatization, and that might happen in increments over many years. And as we can see, a lot of the social activism movements throughout the last century, it doesn't all change at once. It takes a generational effort to go through and help to integrate things and concepts and new understandings. Maybe it's not as quickly as we'd like, and I know a lot of people who've been following along with this subject of ufology for a long time. We sometimes anticipate that disclosure is just going to happen and it's all going to change, but in reality, even if a big announcement was made, it's not going to instantly change, I think, the entire world and maybe much at all at once. It would probably take a gradual shift in focus and in how it's a practical way for us to understand a declaration like that. And so while I think many people eagerly await some kind of declaration to the effect of not just my fellow Americans, but citizens of the world, we're not alone. I think that would be a monumental effort, and I don't think it belongs to one person to make that announcement. No. I think it should be a concerted effort by a group, a collective of leaders,
multinational consortium,
and not just politics. Politicians necessarily, but scientists, sociologists,
religious
artists,
leaders,
people that have really, I think a place in our society, our world society, who can help to encourage a social influence, not just to make people believe or to convince people of something or other, but to help to integrate this idea of that we're not alone in society in a way that's it's not invasive. It's not going to be as threatening as if we just have someone come up and say there's aliens and they're here to invade, because that would cause a lot of calamity.
It would go straight back to Brookings' report. Yes, we would have a situation on our hands, and I don't care. Prime example, let people know that we're going to shut things down for 2 weeks. See what happens to the toilet paper supply.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like we've literally just seen this panic across the world. Shelves emptied, things like that. You go and tell the world that this is the case, and I'm not saying that we are not in a different place than we were 50 years ago as a humanity, but we are still panicking animals, Daniel.
Sure.
We are still panicking animals as a whole.
I think, you know, and in some way we're opportunist. If this were to be announced and the manner in which it were to be declared, I think has an effect on how people would respond.
Yes.
If they came out and said, we've discovered non-human intelligence and they're vastly more intelligent than us, but they want to share their wisdom and their technology, people would say, wow, well, you know, it's about time. But if they came out and said, and they're here to invade and they're going to, you know, do all these things, it would be a little bit more scary to think that people would respond in a way that's calm and is collected if they said they don't seem to be evil, they seem to be peaceful. And I think it's just the way in which it's said and conveyed to the public has an effect on what we do in response.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Even the fact of, yes, like we had the private conversation last night, the idea of them using the term non-human intelligence. So beautiful, so awesome. I've said it so many times on this show. If you say that is an alien craft, when you see it, that is no different to put that sighting in a box in that way than it is for a scientist to say, that's not science.
Right.
It doesn't fit in this cube of science that I was taught as a cube of science. It doesn't go in there. It goes in the other bin.
Right.
That's bin B, you know, and it's no different to have a sighting, have an experience, and to pigeonhole it. Not to leave the experience open to interpretation, to debate, to evidence, everything else. And yeah, you know, I mean, even the NASA panel, the scientist who worked very shortly and rapidly with the Go Fast video to, hey, look, here's the azimuth, here's the distance. Like, with all this, we can do the trigonometry to show it's 40 feet, going 40 miles an hour. Known quantitative. Next. You don't have to prove what it is. No, through all the steps, you have proven qualifiable, 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 qualifiable. No need to consider this an anomaly anymore. You know, move on to the next piece of data. If you keep digging and rabbit holing on the same thing, you're ignoring a whole panoply of things over here that still need investigation. You know?
Right. Well, I think that's a really important part for us to understand that, you know, with all of these things that we're finding that are being presented and considered, even at official levels and that capacity, you know, it seems like there could be a lot that hasn't been released or declassified that, you know, there are a number of reasons why, and maybe not just because of the content of what could be having been captured, but the ways in which we can utilize the instruments and measurements and technologies to do that capturing, I think is more of a risk to be released than the content itself sometimes, is what it seems like has been discussed.
Well, precisely, and I think that's a point. That's a very, very huge point to make, Daniel, because most of these videos are coming off military platforms. We cannot very well put every piece of data up on that screen to let the enemy examine it and know the technology that we are using to get that video.
Right.
So you've got to be very careful about which videos you let out, because yes, it may release our capabilities fully.
It's something that we have to keep in mind, because right now we have a few videos that have been released over the years, and nothing too incredibly compelling or convincing. It might be compelling to some people, but the level of being convinced, I think, isn't quite there, because we're still dealing with grainy, low-quality videos. And unfortunately,
even coming off military aircraft and everything else, they're still pretty grainy and low quality.
And people have come up with ideas as to why and insinuate that it's difficult to capture some of these exotic propulsions technologies because it's creating sort of a illusory effect. And maybe that can be the case. But what I would say is important to keep in mind in that regard is that with what some people say is more along the lines of important to look at by way of defense secrecy and airspace. If we have things flying around, if that's the idea, if they're appearing in the sky, if they're flying around, or they're just doing whatever they're doing, navigating by whatever means, unbeknownst to our pilots, even commercial pilots, that could be deemed a threat to airspace, not because they're here to invade necessarily, but because we don't want pilots to run into things that they don't know are there or not.
No different than you flying your drone at 3,000 feet without a FAA permit.
Yeah.
You know?
So I think
you could go out and buy the drone, I'm sure. I guarantee you I can hop onto eBay and buy any drone I want. Is it legal for me to put it up that high in the air? Oh, hell no, not without an actual pilot's license.
Right.
You have to get a pilot's license just like a pilot flying a Piper Cub at that height. You know? So, yeah. And
well, just for sake that I think is important as a bit of continuity on your show, you've got Gort here, and we were just talking last night that The Day the Earth Stood Still, the remake, was on just last night. Here we are at the Texas UFOcon, and just fun to see that movie was on last night. But there was a scene where they're talking about how these spheres are coming down, and they're asking these questions, and Madam Secretary says, "I think we're asking the wrong questions. They disabled our defense satellite system." And that tells us something about their intention. And however the movie plays out is interesting itself. But that notion, I think, assessing if something were to happen and a satellite, a defense satellite or something, or whatever kind of equipment is deactivated or whatever happens, they seem to have the impression that it gives them an idea about the intentions and motives. So whether that case in the movie plays out in real life or not, it's something we have to consider, that whatever we see happen with non-human intelligence and the potential interactions that people are having or have had in the historic past or might continue to have here in the future, it's something that we'll interpret through our own lens of society and the ways that we see things through human perspective. Will kind of personify in the event that things happen, whether their intentions or this or that, we'll still interpret it, good or evil, or all these different simple dividing issues that I think we should keep in mind, that if there are societies that are advanced or however sophisticated out there, that they probably were able to come across understanding certain ideas about their own technology, the implications that they face regarding destroying themselves or not. So some people, scientists have considered that, there's this idea that societies can only reach a certain point until either they blow themselves up, they kill themselves off, or they've reached a point past warring with each other to be able to be more altruistic and get past that. So I think a big focus for myself, at least lately, in this idea of looking at how we as people interpret the phenomenon, and how the phenomenon itself, let's just say potential civilizations, interact in a way that we have any degree of relatability to by our own culture. So the whole idea of what I presented dealt with cosmic anthropology, and in two ways. What we can think of as learning as much as we can, when and however we can, about other civilizations and the way that they operate, interact, their practices, beliefs, technologies, all of that. Simply because those are the things what we do here in our own human society. So the other half of that is how we understand a lot of these types of concepts, how it affects us, and how we integrate new understandings in a way that kind of changes our own reality, hopefully for the better. But if we are able to kind of make sense of certain challenging things in nature, as all of history, for humanity has led us into, sometimes when we get past that, dark, mysterious issue, we're propelled forward, and we can understand it, we can utilize it, we integrate it, and we can somehow maybe engineer it into a constructive point in society that's either helping in some way or another. And I think that's important to consider, that if there are groups out there or here that we can learn about their ways of life, and that maybe scientists have an opportunity to expand upon the anthropological implications for both ourselves, humanity, and what we can learn from other groups that have made it as best as they can, wherever they are and where they're from. That should help us in a lot of ways, and I think that's kind of one of the things that New Frontiers in Science can help have a framework set in place for.
Yeah, no, precisely, because our new technologies, the new things that we have, give us whole new realms by which to examine old data, whole new realms by which to examine old evidence. A prime example, Daniel, to tie the two topics together of new things, looking at stuff new ways, and the threat. One of the many things that's been brought up in numerous of these panels has been the Malmstrom Air Force incident. And the fact that, yeah, there was a large craft that at one point shut down missile command at Malmstrom and took a good chunk of our nuclear arsenal at the time offline. Like you said, direct show, direct intention. It's either one of two things. Don't use these, or look at what we can do to your toys. But yeah, a lot of the conversation has been centered around, even last year, the MUFON Symposium was friend or foe. That was the theme, because that was a lot of the questions coming out of the first UFO UAP panel was, are these friendly? Are they not? Are they posing a threat? And now the conversation in the last whistleblower panel was, they are posing a threat. They have been recorded over our training ranges. This is dangerous. They are in the civilian skies. This is dangerous. And yeah, you do have to kind of wonder, is that the call for militarization of the topic? Is that the call for, sure, we're trying to hunt this money down, but maybe we need to release some money to get things ready on another end?
Right.
And I can see where people get nefarious with that thought pretty quick whenever it comes to the first thing being the protection of airspace and everything else. Yeah,
and I think these are all important things to consider. Now, one of the things we do as humans is we personify concepts, we extrapolate them, and sometimes people say we shouldn't do that because we're looking at it through the eyes of a human. And I mean, in reality, that's really all we have to do to try to make sense of in some way. And I think it's okay to do that sometimes, but also keep in mind that the ways of thinking, modes of life can be drastically different all over the universe, and
they're drastically different all over the world.
Right, and so when we see how we interpret intention, it sometimes gets misconstrued because of something that we perceive that could have been deemed negative or bad or evil. Just as if we're walking outdoors and we step down, we feel something, we look, we accidentally step like in an anthill. Maybe we didn't mean to do that, but obviously it's caused an extremely devastating effect on the ant civilization.
Community.
Did that necessarily imply that we meant to go and do that? Well, for us, no, not necessarily, but to them, that's a whole other series of things going on, but can they even interpret that some other being did that and intended to or not? That's a whole other set of questions. But the reality is that, let's say if it were people, they might interpret that as an incredibly devastating event that can be interpreted in many ways. I think that it's important to see that throughout a lot of the experiences that are shared throughout all of history, that you have a myriad of things all over the spectrum of they're evil, they're demonic, to their angels, to their advanced civilizations, their advanced spiritual dimensional beings. And in reality, I think that these are all just lenses of cultural perception that we try to make sense of through what we understand in our own lives. And it's not to say that they're either right or wrong, but they're just ways that we try to cope with our own reality best we can. And so I think the more we learn about these different types of phenomena, if there are intelligence behind some of them, because I think there's not just one explanation, but if there are other civilizations out there in the universe, not just out in space by planets, but just in other dimensions and other realms, all these things that they somehow sustained their existence long enough to probably have to be considered about some challenging things that maybe we in some way can look at in a similar existence of trying to make sense of resources, different groups within our own communities that don't always get along. So how do we overcome those things? I think that we can learn a lot from historical examples of our own people, our own ancestors, but at the same time, we live in a completely different existence of society and technology and resources. Everything's more accessible to everybody than ever, and I think that as we continue to go forward, it's important that when we deal with something to the effect of introducing the a concept of non-human intelligence, whether that comes in the form of aliens, terrestrial-based non-human intelligence, or something that we try to talk about as being dimensional and whatever that can mean for people, it's important to know that it's not just an opportunity for us to study all of that, although that can be fascinating. It does have an effect on how we understand each other, our role in the universe, and how we're all connected into our own world.
And the danger is always, Daniel, is that distillation mentality. You know, once again, we want to put something in a box because when it's in a box, we can look at it, we can hold it, we can understand it easier. It's not some nebulous concept, you know. And right now there's an issue going on in our society where we're having a problem with a definition, you know, and we're having problem with putting things inside of a box. Instead of leaving it open-ended, instead of leaving the conversation open-ended, we want it in a box.
Right.
You know?
Well, you mentioned the testimony of David Grutch here at the July 26th congressional hearings, who mentioned non-human biologics. And that term itself is curious because they didn't say alien. In some ways, they did talk about certain things I think can be taken out of context and, of course, ran with and embellished. But I think the wording itself was a curious choice, if not anything else. It wasn't that he said, we've got aliens, that we've got extraterrestrial spaceships necessarily in the way that had been described a little bit more in some of the news interviews that he had done a little bit before that. But when you're in front of Congress and you know that there are many people who are otherwise maybe just disinterested or unfamiliar with this topic, hearing this stuff for the first time maybe, that it makes us wonder what would have been different if he had said alien rather than non-human biologics.
You would have been giving a definition to something that you don't know. You don't know. You don't know. He never saw the craft. He never saw the bodies. All he has is the testimony of people who have and who have said the money has been obfuscated to do this.
Right.
So to say this is alien, he would have been absolutely talking out of step. But once again, to use that non-human biological entity concept, or non-human biological intelligence, rather, fantastic, because that steps it into the realm of, is it a cybernetic organism that has been made to go and gather data? Probe-like, things like that. We striate things a whole lot more that way. It's not just one lump sum of it's this or it's nothing now. Well, there's an open rainbow of possibilities of what it could be by using that term.
Right. I think it should make us wonder when the term biologics is used. I mean, it's contextual. Biologics typically refers to something in the pharmaceutical industry and products that are manufactured for different purposes. In the context that David Grutch was using it, I think it's important to consider that something biological typically is organic. And
or has organic matter.
Yeah, exactly. And so it implies something. It's not just that he said we've got non-human intelligence only.
Yes.
But non-human biological could be that that there are life forms that have not yet maybe transitioned beyond their organic form, but could augment it, just as we do now. We augment ourselves with all kinds of things. We're basically cyborgs in some way, primitive cyborgs, but we're making all kinds of technological advances in all of that to help bridge the gap between an organic and synthetic type of existence.
They just released the first computer chips that used actual organic brain material inside of them.
Oh, I mean, just right there, you can see that it makes us wonder with a civilization that could have a little bit of an upper hand on anything we're doing, that maybe they have surpassed, and this is obviously very theoretical and speculative, but we could see how maybe an advanced civilization that's got seemingly unlimited resources, but still, to the effect that they can only sustain their organic existence as long as as permissible through their own means, that maybe they found some help along the way to prolong their longevity, and in doing so, we do the same things, or we would like to. And I think that it makes sense that you would consider that if there are other biological intelligences, that they would probably find ways, whether we interpret that as technology or medicine or life-enhancing, applications. I think that it's reasonable to assess that, some of these things we could potentially be coming across are not only biological in nature, but also could have some kind of synthetic component likened to what we are doing now with AI or with machine learning. And a lot of what we see in our own domain of all of those things is already advancing so much. It's hard to consider or fathom a civilization that's had not just a few thousand years, but maybe millions of years to work and to come and go and to be brought back.
Well, even the idea that we were talking about last night from the conversation that I had at the remote viewing conference from the gentleman who was like, yes, quite a bit of what we're seeing is fully explainable contractor material, things like that. But there is a slice of it that, yes, has been given to us by extraterrestrial civilization, and it has been given to us in a cooperative effort because over the millennia of them building themselves to the neurologic civilization that they are, no need for communication the way we grunting apes do it with our mouths, things like that. Because of all this high technology that they built and had to come together as a species to make happen, they have lost their individuality and creativity and no longer know how to use this amazing technology with new applications. They need us creative little monkey guys to take care of that for them. Because we see things and we see 85 different applications, 85 different uses. They have specialized their world and their species so much that that creative side of a new way to use old technology doesn't even click in there. And that's pretty remarkable to think about. If you think about that hypothesis,
right?
That is utterly the case.
It's a bit of irony to consider that something we would consider so highly advanced is so out of tune with the ideas that come so naturally to us as humans.
Daniel, though, think about that in reference to us as humanity. Even the fact of, aliens built the pyramids. Way too complex. Way too... Really? I don't know. I think that's very dismissive to think that people like Archimedes didn't exist, who were, thousands of years ahead of their time as far as the technology that they came up with working in the Bronze Age, I think that really discounts the ingenuity of humanity and the fact that we have come up with these solutions numerous times and then didn't use them and then forgot about them. I mean, the example I use on the show all the time is woodcraft. In our grandparents' age, you could have gone out just about anywhere in this countryside, right here in Jefferson, taken a 6x6 plank to someone and gone, I need a spiral column in a couple weeks. No problem. Here's a quote. Yeah. How about now?
Not so much.
Could you go find that dude to hand carve you a column? That is not amazing technology. That is a crafting skill using things like an adze that go back to medieval times, man.
Yeah.
You don't need modern technology to make that happen. What you need is the knowledge of how to do it.
Right. It seems like these days you would just have to find someone with a 3D printer to hit a button and crank them out.
But that's the thing. And at what point that we need a column, do we not have a 3D printer anymore? And now we just don't know how to make a column.
Yeah, it's very eye-opening to consider that this could all go away, and we have lost a lot of that knowledge. And it's really important to keep a lot of those things in mind, that we look back and we see, we're told that civilization is slowly rising up from city-states to nations, but really we look back in history and it's we see ruins of majestic monuments and things that make us wonder, how did we do that?
We don't have to go back that far, though. Is what's funny. Hey, I'm Cajun. That border is 40 minutes to the east of us right now to hit Cajun country in Louisiana, where they literally speak a different language that is native to America. Nowhere else. That is a 15th century form of court French mixed with Native American. That's Cajun. It is a unique language to that region of America only. One generation, Daniel. It's almost gone.
Yes.
One generation is all it took for an entire race of people to forget their language that they have had since the 15th century. If you take a Cajun to France and have them speak Cajun to them, a French person will look at them like they are insane, despite the fact that they are pretty well speaking unchanged court French from the 15th century. Theirs has changed numerous iterations. The Cajun language has not.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating.
It's a prime example of, like, it doesn't take long for us to forget.
Right. It's fascinating. It's also very unfortunate that does happen, and we lose a lot along the way from all the different groups out there who have completely been either assimilated or just completely disappeared because of any number of things, and that we could have a lot of
traditions, all kinds of things.
A number of things out there that help us to give insight on a number of things which we find mysterious and incredible. But I hope that as we continue to improve both in society, technologically, and spiritually, philosophically, however, that we're open to the possibility that we'll still be able to have light shed upon things using historical records and historical information, along with new data and new methods of research. And so I'm hopeful that we can continue to make those discoveries, and in doing so, not learn about just those types of phenomena, but about how we can work together in our own culture and humanity as well. And that's been a big focus of mine when it comes to the anthropological implications.
That's why I love talking with you, man, because if we aren't having this anthropological conversation, we can come up with all the data and technology we want. What are we as a humanity doing with it?
Right.
Like we can change the world around us, man. The question is, are we? Are we? And unless you're having the conversation, you're not. You're not. You are a stymieing point for humanity at this point. To not have the conversations at this point in humanity will do us no good. We have to have the hard conversations now, because it's happening. It's no longer a situation of, 20, 30 years from now. Like, it is happening now. By the time my son is in college and he's 6, right now, man, like 15 years from now, I can't even imagine what we're going to be dealing with technologically and philosophically and theosophically with this topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing to see even in the last decade, and I think that it'll continue to be that way, and the universe is full of surprises. I think that it's a humbling experience to make those discoveries in a way that's not startling. I think it's one of those issues where we are either repelled backward because of something that we want to say no, that's too much for us to handle, or it'll propel us forward and say, now that we understand it better, let's embrace it, move forward with it, and do what we can to work together. And I think that's important, that we can open this dialogue up. It opens people's minds and their hearts to the possibility that not only are we not alone, but we can find this as a common ground for us to work together to see if someone else can do it out there, maybe we can too.
This is the common ground, Daniel. This is the common. If you're looking for the common ground, this is it. This is it. This is what gets beyond politics.
Yeah.
This is what drives all of that home. This is the common ground. So you've heard me say it before. If this is where I make my stand, fine. So be it. This will be my hill. I could give money to political candidates if I want to. I sponsor things like this because this is the conversation that needs to be had in our world right now.
I hope it unifies us for the better and in ways that can improve society and, again, elevate humanity.
Absolutely.
And do what we can to, make these beautiful discoveries that keep us going. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Daniel, thank you so much, as always, for coming on, bud.
Of course, Chris.
Look right there. Let everybody know where they can go to follow the Vortex, where they can go to buy your upcoming book whenever it comes out, all that good stuff. Bud.
Absolutely. So I'm pretty accessible on all social media platforms. I do have the Vortex channel on YouTube, which you can watch all these other fun interviews and presentations. And when I finally get the Aurora publication about the legend of 1897. It's going to have an interactive timeline and full of resources. So I'll be posting that on my website as well, which you can go check out, the vortex.online. And then along with the ethnology I mentioned earlier, Mythos, and that's going to be coming out, hopefully soon after. But it's something that I think is important for us to be able to continue looking at, that it's not just going to have all the answers. I think that it's important to show that it's just a point of conversation that helps, initiate further dialogue, and that we can continue to work together to find out what's next. So I'm glad to follow up for anyone who's interested in looking further into the Aurora legend, anything to do with the subject of UFOs or any other mysterious subject that I'm featuring in that book, Mythos, as well. So they can find it online and on pretty much all social media platforms. Yeah,
fantastic, man. So happy to hear it, because once again, it's not about the questions or the answers posed in the book. It's about the questions posed in the book.
That's it, yeah.
And what we do with those questions, Daniel. Always great talking with you. I love our conversations on and off air, bud.
As always.
While you are online checking out all of the amazing work from Daniel Allen Jones and the Vortex at Vortex Online, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can like, follow, subscribe, all that good business. That's where you can find Daniel Allen Jones' channel, as well as all of our guests' YouTube channels embedded right there on our videos page, so you can very easily find and follow their proper channels, folks. Thanks as always for tuning in. Thanks as always for having open hearts, open minds for these hard conversations. It's always great talking with you guys, always great talking with the researchers. Stay tuned, everybody. Next Tuesday night, we will be airing our full coverage from MUFON Symposium 2023 in Cincinnati, Ohio. That wraps our official coverage for Texas UFOcon 2023 here in Jefferson, Texas. Thank you so much for tuning in as always, everybody. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.